Welcome to the Social Media Church Podcast. I'm Neil Smith. I'm joined by my friend Casey Fulgenzi here in New York City in Gotham Podcast Studios. Casey, thanks for joining us.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm glad to be here.
Well, you do a lot of things. We met here in the city. And so can you maybe share a little bit about what your day job is and then maybe some of the things you do outside of your day job as well?
Yeah, so my day job, I work at Redeemer Presbyterian Church in New York. Most famously known probably is founded by Tim Keller.
Yes.
And at Redeemer, I do a few things, but my primary role is I'm Associate Director of Gospel and Life, which is a resource site from where we provide resources from Redeemer and primarily Tim Keller.
Yep.
It's where all his sermons and all his content lives.
Yeah.
And so my main job is I run that, so I oversee that and make sure the day-to-day everything's happening there.
And that includes then website, social media, email.
So it's primarily an e-commerce site, but so it's making sure everything's running smoothly on that, and then also as well as we have a large email list of thousands that I'm regularly promoting new resources to or discounted resources, as well as so we're just now really starting kind of social.
Yes.
And we've just started working with you and your team on somewhat of a donation model where we're releasing for the first time probably more free resources than we ever have. And so on our podcast, on the Gospel and Life podcast. And so I'm managing the podcast as well, just the day-to-day of uploading and getting, say, like our voiceovers recorded and things like that. And so now with this new donation model, we're working with you guys where we also have books where, someone gives a donation to Gospel and Life, then we'll send them one of Tim's books. And every month that changes. And it's we kind of do a theme per month. So the month for November, our theme is marriage.
Yep.
And Tim and Kathy, his wife, just released a marriage devotional, 365-day devotional. And so we're releasing on our podcast, which is Monday, Wednesday, Friday, 3 days a week. We're doing his actually most popular sermon series, which is a marriage series from actually 91. It's still the most popular series that we have on Gospel and Life. And so with that, we kind of plug the book as well as if you give a donation, we'll send you the book for within a week or two.
Yeah.
And and so that's our new kind of adventure that we're on with Gospel and Life.
And I want to get into some of the other things you're doing. That's what we're going to focus on in this podcast. But I want to hear maybe as you've gone into that, I would say you've not just doubled down on podcasting, you've tripled down on podcasting. Yeah. What are you learning in the world of podcasting as you focus so heavily on it in the last 3 to 6 months?
Yeah. So so we officially started the full process July. We kind of started early in June. Prior to that, our podcast, we've had the Gospel and Life podcast actually existed for years now.
Yes.
At least probably 6, maybe 7 years.
Yep.
Early days, it was something. I've been a Redeemer now. Let's see, this March will be 6 years. Wow. Prior to me coming on, it was something. The podcast was kind of just casually updated. When I came on, we revamped it a little bit and made it something where we're releasing once every other week. And we also started putting the audio, the just audio sermons, as whatever we put on the podcast, we'd also make available on YouTube. And we just use a static image and just make the audio available there.
Yeah.
And so we had a process of doing that every 2 weeks. We kind of, I'd say after about 2 years or so, we kind of put that on hold, and it was very sporadic in how often we released, even more probably so than we were before I came on. And then and part of that we revamped after starting working with you guys on a formal strategy of curating a donor group that could support Gospel and Life.
Yep.
And so now, since we're doing that, like I said, 3 days a week, it's really, we've always had tons of listeners and tons of subscribers to the Gospel and Life podcast. Tens of thousands, over 100,000, listens per episode.
Sure.
That's always been the case. But now it's been interesting to see. It's never really grown. It's always kind of been static. Yep. But now that we're actually releasing it regularly, it is growing. And, and we're regularly hearing feedback from people like, oh, thank you guys so much for doing this regularly. And where, even when we were trying to decide, how often should we do it? Should we do it 1 a week, 2 a week, 5 a week, Monday through Friday? even 3 days a week felt like, I was like, oh, that's a lot of content. And Tim's sermons aren't, 20-minute sermons.
Right.
They're 45 minutes.
Yes.
And they're heavy. Like, Tim's a very smart man, and I mean, he does a great job of, kind of dumbing it down for folks like us. But it still can be stuff where it's one of those things where it's helpful to listen to twice or even 3 times to really even grasp kind of what he illustrated. And that's no fault that Tim does a fantastic job of it, but it's like some of it's just like,
it's just meaty.
It's meaty. There's so much little details in there, and that you might not even notice the first time.
Yep.
And so we weren't even sure, like, with 3 days a week, people are actually going to listen that often. Like, and sure enough, they are. And I'm sure we can go to every day, and people would. They just love it. And part of that's been, I think, demand, just because in the past it hasn't always been easy to get this stuff.
Yep.
I mean, even though we had like things like an app, it just still wasn't easy to consume.
Yes.
Stuff was behind a paywall, things like that. Whereas now, removing some of those barriers and friction and making it easier to access has been a big help as far as, I think, growth in that. Yep. As well as just the consistency. Now, I think people probably realize we're doing it 3 days a week, and I know for my favorite podcasts, I know when they release their episodes, and that affects my week on how I'm listening to stuff. Yeah. So I'm sure there's people like that have started doing that. And now that it's consistent, people are also talking about it more, so they'll tag us on social and like, love that you guys have done this. I had somebody the other day tag us and say, I think on Twitter, talk about like, whoever you guys hired to change things up on the podcast was a great hire. So glad you did. I was like, it's the same people, but we just now have some we actually have a strategy around it, as opposed to before it was just kind of just casual sharing that. Yeah. So it's been interesting to see the growth behind it. And we track everything too in our numbers, and so we actually see that our listener growth is growing. Yep. And it's it's one of those where it's like it's a mountain, so it's climbing. Yes. You can see it regularly on the charts. Yep. And I will say one thing's interesting. When we were more casually doing it a few years ago, we would regularly, and this just speaks to how the podcast industry has changed and grown. We used to regularly be in like the top 100 of podcasts in iTunes in the U.S. store, not even like just Christian podcasts, but we regularly hit, 75 to 125 probably in the ranks on overall podcasts in the iTunes store. Yep. Now we usually float around like, sometimes we don't even break like 200. Yep. And I would say that has nothing to do with us, even though we have more listeners. Yeah. There's just so many podcasts now. Yes. Yes. And there's so many great podcasts. Yes. And so it's interesting just to see, whereas, 5 years ago that wasn't quite the case. It was still kind of a new thing that was reemerging again, I guess. Yes. And part of me is like kind of like regretting, like, oh man, we could have been.
That's what I was going to ask you. Do you wish you would have gone all in earlier?
Yeah, I mean, there's some other ones that have been like Joel Osteen, I would say, is one. There's a few others that are probably regularly up there at the top. Yep. That were consistent and been around for years that we were probably competing. I say competing in quotation marks, competing with in the when I said we were doing it a few years ago. That have stuck with it and have always been doing it consistently, that are still kind of up there. Yes. But yeah, it's a really interesting, even in the Christian market, where because you can see the categories, so in the Christian categories. Yep. Interesting to see like new podcasts pop up and that are kind of trending and doing really well. Yep. I know there's a lot of different things with like algorithms there. Like I know some of that the rankings are related to new subscribers. Yep. And we actually haven't had any strategy around getting new subscribers. That's outside of just like creating a consistent habit of us posting but we haven't tried acquisition, I guess, for for podcast listeners yet. Yep. And I'm sure that'll probably be something we'll get to in maybe the next 6-12 months or something. But and I know the more subscribers you get, or new subscribers, I should say. So as you get new subscribers, that's actually one of the biggest impacts on the algorithm as far as like rankings. Yep. Not necessarily listeners. Yeah. But it is interesting that I know we get on average an episode within say 2 weeks gets probably about 100 to 125, even 150,000 downloads. Yep. Now that doesn't necessarily mean that many people, but are listening to it. But I mean, it would definitely be I would say you could probably say around 100,000 listens. So it's interesting to see that, knowing what we get, and then knowing to see what like the Joel Osteens and some of the other people that are even higher than us. I mean, I can't even imagine what they're. I mean, I'm sure I could reach out to some of those guys that are doing that. But just the numbers there, and but also like as new people are listening podcasts, to see how well they're doing.
Yes.
And how much. Most recently, I think Apple's changed some things on how they present that, because and we've talked about this in the past, like how Apple realized that churches are actually like the number one users of podcasts on their platform.
Yes.
So it's interesting to see how they've kind of shifted some of their focus to make sure that that's accounted for, I guess, and how they do things.
It is such a massive opportunity today, podcasting.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think at the end of the day, what I appreciate even your transparency is you're crushing podcasting, but you're figuring it out. Like you don't know, you don't have all the answers, but every day you know a little bit more, and you're learning a little bit more, and you're getting better, and you're reaching more people by being strategic and understanding it. So if you don't have a podcast yet, get started.
Yeah.
And you'll get better. And what's going to happen, I guarantee this. Everyone, when they get started podcasting, they're going to regret not getting started sooner.
Yeah.
So if you get started today, that's going to be way better than getting started tomorrow. And so just get started. Casey, I want to talk about one of the websites you have, and this is actually, maybe let's talk about all of your side hustle things, but then let's focus. So you've launched a lot of different initiatives to help in different ways. You're entrepreneurial, clearly. So talk maybe about some of those things you're doing outside of Redeemer.
Yeah, so I have a few different side projects. Some are financially motivated and side hustles.
Yeah.
I mean, one of the most recent ones would be what I call WP Bellhop, which is a WP for WordPress. Which basically we do anytime if somebody needs a WordPress site, it can get confusing for the person looking to get the site done, in the sense of like they're reaching out to agencies and freelancers, and you might get a rate from a freelancer to do it for $500. You might get another rate from an agency to do it for $10,000. And whether this is a church or anybody. And so we said, what would it be if we just made a flat rate where you understood it was easy to understand exactly what you're going to be paying for, and it was still going to be quality and custom. And so we charge a $1,000 one-time fee for us to build you a custom site, and then we do a $99 a month plan where we host that site, as well as provide maintenance and updates and things like that, so you don't have to worry about all the pain points of WordPress, as well as make you we'll do a weekly edit for you. So whether that's uploading a new item in your store or a new sermon on your site or on your church site or whatever it is, we handle that for you. So that's probably the newest one, and that one's actually, there are financial incentives there where I'm like, this could be a good side business for me. And it's doing well. And then there's been a few other ones. One last year that I did, earlier this year that I did was giving fees. And this was more as part of a kind of a community, I guess, that I'm in. A Product Hunt, it's a really popular site. They were doing like a kind of hackathon, I would lack for a better word, kind of a new no-code one where it is they ask people to build something and you can enter this competition. And at the same time there was some new giving platforms coming out for churches, and I was like, there's not a lot of transparency here. And so I felt there needs to be, and I'm also I'm active in the church communications group and a few other church groups. Where regularly people are asking like, hey, what platform do you use for giving and donations and stuff? And so I would say, this should have some more transparency here. So my project for that competition was something called Giving Fees. So givingfees.com, and basically it's kind of a spreadsheet. It's not the most visually appealing thing. It was kind of it was thrown together pretty quickly. I was focused more on the data rather than the visuals of it. But basically you can go, and there's a list of, I think, 15 to 20, 25 maybe different giving platforms. There's two sections, one for churches, one for nonprofits, because the industries are a little different there. And so you have basic pricing listed, as well as basic feature sets listed. And you have everyone from like Planning Center to Tithely to a lot of the popular ones. There's some popular ones that aren't on there. Going to throw out the name PushPay, but some other ones that are popular that aren't there just because they're not they're not upfront about their pricing. Usually it's one of those where you have to work with a salesperson and kind of get custom pricing for your church or ministry. So the ones that are upfront about the pricing and make it listed on their page, I have that listed in the sheet. And you can basically go in there, and the way it works is you put in your best estimate of like what your average donation is. So say your average donation is $300 or something. And you put your how many donations you get a week, and if they're like ACH, so bank giving through your bank, or if they're giving by like credit card, and you can put all those in, and it'll calculate what actually what the pricing breakdown would be for each of the say 20 different platforms. So you can see actually along with those platforms' monthly rates, what everything will total up to. And so maybe on this one platform, in fees, you might pay $1,000 a year or something. With once everything's calculated, and then on another platform it might be $2,000. And I did this. It was more of just, there was people were releasing things and saying like, "Hey, this is the lowest cost giving platform," and it's like, well, it depends on who you are or like what your church is. It's definitely unique for your church. And and I just felt like, again, there wasn't a lot of transparency there. And there wasn't an easy way for churches to compare all those things. Even me, I spent hours and hours actually going and finding all that stuff, and it was a pain. I still get emails from different companies saying like, "Oh, hey, we added this feature," or "Hey, we're not listed. Can you add us?" And sometimes I have to push back and be like, "No, because you're not transparent on this stuff." Or I haven't told anybody no because of what they charge. But I will say, surprisingly on that one, I found that the church world was actually a lot better than maybe that I shouldn't be surprised by this. I'm happy to find this. The church world was a lot better with their giving platforms, the companies that are behind those, than the as far as like rates and stuff, than the nonprofit world.
That's encouraging. Like the general nonprofit world.
In the general nonprofit world. And like I said, you can go on the site and switch over and look at the nonprofit ones too, pricing over like what's common there. The nonprofit ones are regularly trying to take a larger percentage of donations. Whereas the church world, I will say they are doing that, so just so people understand how some of this works in the church world. I know that's not what I'm here to talk about mainly, but
it's interesting and it's important to everybody who listens to this.
Basically, people. Or basically the companies that are behind the giving platforms. Right now, there's an industry standard rate of a transactional cost related to any type of transaction, whether it's a gift, a donation, or a purchase. Industry rate would be 2.9% of the charge plus 30 cents. So that means if you swipe your credit card to give $10 or buy something $10, the company, the in-between company, would be, or rather the company that's like handling the process of that. Usually it's a big corporation called Stripe, but it's similar to like a PayPal or something. They're going to charge on that $10 2.9%. So what is that? 29 cents. Plus 30 cents. So out of that $10. The company that you're buying it from or the church you're giving that $10 to is actually only getting $9. What's the math on that? $9.41, I think. Some, give or take a few cents. I might be off on that. So that's how those companies make their money. That's how the Stripes and the PayPals. That's how they make their money. Now all these giving platforms have popped up, like the Tidely's and the PushPays and the Planning Center and all those type of things. Some of them have different methods. Some of them charge a flat rate monthly rate of set to be on their platform. Most notably, Brady Share released a newer one. Rebel Giving. And their big thing is that, it's a flat monthly rate. They're not actually going to take a cut of any transaction cost. And so, whereas a lot of other companies, they might only be charging you that 2.9% and 30 cents. But what is happening is they're getting a cut of that. So because they're doing a larger volume of millions of dollars, they actually might only be Stripe might only be charging them say 2%, or a reality it's more probably like 1.5%. And so what happened is they're getting that, even though they're getting to charge you, the cost for them to charge you for that gift is only, instead of even though it seems like it might be 2.9%, it's actually only probably at 1.5, 1.6% or something like that.
Yeah.
And then, but their costs, they're charging you the 2.9%.
Yep.
So they're making 4%, 1.5% off of every donation that comes through your church.
Yep.
And now I'm not discriminating against that. Sorry, discriminating is not the right one. I'm not criticizing that. I think that's a business.
Yeah.
That's how their business is structured.
Yes.
So some of them provide free to very low cost monthly plans to offer these giving platforms, and that's how they're making their money, is getting that percentage.
Yes.
Whereas other ones, like now Rebel Give being the newest one, they're saying that's not right. I disagree with that. They're saying that's not right. Instead, we should charge. We'll just give a flat monthly fee. We want a flat monthly fee for what you guys are that you pay us to be on Rebel Give, and we're going to get the lowest rate possible for you.
Yep.
And that works out for some churches, and those are all listed in that sheet on givingfees.com, and you can calculate it. And so financially that works out for some churches, and financially it doesn't.
Yep.
So you just kind of have to see. And there's tons of nuances there too. Whereas say Rebel Give, they have their big thing is that everyone that gives has to cover the donation, the cost of that transaction fee.
Yes.
So that 2.9%, I don't know what Rebel Give, I think it's like 1.8 or 2% or something.
Sure.
What they actually, because they're getting that discount, and so what they're actually charging is only what they're getting it at. And they require that the donor covers those fees.
Okay.
So a lot of platforms actually have that as an opt-in.
Yeah.
And churches and ministries and nonprofits see success with that because they're saying, hey, I want that $10 we're talking about. I actually do want the church to get that $10.
Yes.
So I'm going to go ahead and pay that 49 cents myself. And so that way the church gets the full $10, and I'm going to be charged $10.41 or whatever we said the rest was. Yep. And so what happens is with Rebel Give, they're saying everyone should do that. That way the church is always getting 100%.
Interesting.
I think I appreciate the motive there. I think there's probably there's an issue. My issue there is that it's a little bit of marketing, because it says your church is getting to the church communications person saying, hey, your church is going to get 100% of donations. While that's true, I think there could be put off people that are members and even non-members that want to give to a church or something.
Yes.
I think you could cause some issues there where someone sees, you're trying to get every dime of me.
Yeah.
And so, especially with churches, they're seen, in a lot of cases, they're seen as being kind of money hungry, and just out to get my dollar, so my pastor can drive a Bentley. So not my pastor, but
just to be clear,
not my pastor, but just so whoever's pastor that may be.
Yes.
And so, so that could rub people the wrong way, and then that could cause you to not get that $500 gift because they don't want to do that.
Yes.
And in that case, even though it seemed like you saved money, you actually didn't, because you lost out on that $500 gift.
Yes.
I don't think that's that's going to always happen, but I think that could happen sometimes. And then even if it happens once, that could cause it actually end up causing you more to be on that platform. So nothing to, I think they have great intentions with all of that. But I think there's a lot of different things like that where it's like, well, I create a giving fees to bring
I love it.
transparency to all of that. I know,
and I think we're in a state with church giving where I think we need to analyze, are we on the best platform? So in the last 10 years, I've always pushed just make it available. Yep. A lot of churches just weren't even doing online giving. Mm-hmm. Where now I think every church, most churches now have online giving. Yep. But I think you need to check, are we best stewarding these platforms to make sure that we have a good giving experience, that we have stable technology, security, so that we're getting good rates. I was just looking at the nonprofit, so this is a fascinating sheet here. There's one on the nonprofit side, 7%.
Yeah, exactly.
That they're taking. You need to know these things and not just accept that.
Exactly. Yeah. I was so surprised about that. And even for I even ran into this issue when we were working with you guys, and we were trying to figure out for our new nonprofit stuff with Gospel and Life, our new donation-based model with Gospel and Life, where we were trying to figure out our CRM and what we were going to use for our landing pages and our giving portal and that type of stuff. And one of the ones that I looked at heavily that I really liked and was really well done, and had a lot of features that I thought was really cool, and it was just a better a better kind of user experience.
Yeah.
They just did really good a job on the design.
Yep.
And so I was like, I want to use this. But they were going to tack on, I think 1 or 2% or something like that to whatever our Stripe costs were going to be.
Yeah.
And it's like, when you're talking $50,000, maybe that doesn't matter. When you're talking hundreds of thousands of dollars or millions of dollars, like that adds up.
Yes.
And it's like, well, what's that? Is that experience worth it? And so I was surprised by that when I was looking. I mean, I was grateful for how the church business world and the giving platforms weren't kind of being sharks in that regard.
Yes.
Because they could easily go and say, I'm charging 5-6% to be on this.
Yes.
Or say Patreon is a popular platform for like artists and stuff to work, and they charge a 5% fee, and that's fine. That's their business model. Yeah. But I was encouraged to see that the church business world, and these giving platforms weren't doing that. But I was shocked to see that from the nonprofit world. It wasn't uncommon for me to find platforms that were charging 5-6%.
Yes.
For what? And it was like it was one of those where it's like, almost if you're at least a faith, I mean, you don't have to be a faith-based ministry, but if you are a faith-based ministry, you should probably look at the church giving platforms as opposed to some of these nonprofit giving platforms.
Right.
Because ultimately, again, if you're doing $1 million, I mean, you're talking tens of thousands of dollars that could affect you.
Absolutely.
And for why? Like, what is the real benefit of it?
Yeah.
It was a little discouraging too to see that for like why. These are companies. I mean, they're companies first, obviously.
Yes.
But they're still focused on a niche of people that are doing good and organizations that are doing good.
Yep.
And there's some companies that have showed up in there that are, and I've even talked with friends about even like exploring starting something for nonprofits where they're taking a much smaller fee of they're doing the Stripe fee of 2.9%, or if you get it discounted because you're doing large amounts. And then taking a very small cut as opposed to trying to get 3% of an organization's all donation. Yeah. Or doing something like even like $10 a month to be on the platform. I mean, kind of like what Rebel Give's doing. There's ways you could do that, I think, and still make money.
Yes.
And have a successful business, but not be a shark and just like trying to take every bit you could. And, so.
Well, I think it was generous of you to take the time to build this out and create the transparency. And so I hope everyone will go to givingfees.com, check it out, and just compare and see. And just because it's cheaper doesn't mean it's better. There are a lot of factors to play in. But I think what you did, though, is you created some unique transparency. I live in this world. I live in the world of church and nonprofit. Yeah. And there's some things that I just didn't understand. And when I dug into this for the first time, I remember digging into it the first time. I'm like, man, this is cool. I'm looking at it right now while we're talking. I'm like, man, I want to look at this one again, and just you start seeing some things, and then there's a lot to dig into with giving. We're talking about ChurchLancer today, and so I took you on this tangent, and I appreciate you going down it because I think it's a valuable conversation, and we probably need to even just do a podcast.
Yeah, I know, right?
Because I think there's
just cut what we just talked
all
about.
Of the factors. No, we're not going to cut it because it's very valuable.
No, but I'm saying you cut it and turn it
and put another podcast. But let's talk about ChurchLancer.
So ChurchLancer is another. That ultimately, that's what you're relating to me. I've got my hands in quite a few projects. That's ultimately one that I started.
Where did it come from?
It probably was one of my first ones. Yeah. That I started to just build for the sake of it because I felt there was a need there, similar to Giving Fees. That came from, so again, I've been active in the Church Communications group and a few other groups. Church Communications, I've been there since day one when Katie started it.
Literally day one?
Literally day one, yeah.
Really?
Yeah. I mean, it came from, it was started from the Visual Media Church group.
Okay,
Church Motion Graphics behind it, Jeff. It started because I was active in that group too, and Katie was in there. Yeah. And there was a lot of church communications related questions that had nothing to do with visual, like motion graphics or like sets or like your worship set and that type of stuff, whereas that's what kind of that was focused on. Yep. And Katie just asked Jeff if she could start her own thing, kind of get his blessing for that, and he did. And so I remember from day one, I was in that world. I was only in that group primarily because of I saw there were a lot of those type of questions, and that's my world. So so once Katie started that, I was part of that group. So since day one, however many years ago that was now. Yeah. Anyway, so I've been active in that, and I saw one of the regular questions that came up was, I need a logo.
Yes.
Our church needs a logo, or this new sub-ministry needs a logo.
Yeah.
Who would you recommend? Or I need a website built. Who would you recommend?
Yeah.
And and it still happens to this day. I mean, probably I'd say at least once a week, and in those groups, and people don't know how to use the search function in those groups to go back, or they either don't realize it's there, or that people are just don't want to mess with it. And so I figured instead of every week there being a thread where 50 people promote themselves to try to get hired by this person that posted in a Facebook group.
Yep.
Why not I just build like a kind of a database of creative freelancers and agencies that work with churches, so people could kind of browse on their own and easily browse, their portfolio and things like that. Yep. So it was a project I think I took on. Let's see, I guess I launched it. It was like 2 years ago now. It's probably when I started on it, And I would say, I will still say, I give the caveat that it was very much an MVP and still is. I actually haven't done much to it in quite a long time.
Okay.
It's MVP, meaning minimal viable product. Viable product.
It's a pretty good MVP, man.
Yeah, thanks, man.
Yeah.
But I had, I think at the time, I had Kyler Nixon, who's a graphic designer. I reached out to him. I was like, hey, can you help me with a logo? And Kyler was very generous and threw some together quickly. And and just I got some feedback. I think I created a Google form and reached out to 5-10 freelancers I knew, and then another 5 or 10 people that I knew that would be hiring these type of people.
Yep.
And saying like, hey, what would you expect from this? What would you want?
Yep.
And so we asked a variety of questions, and and then I built it. I found a WordPress theme that could kind of do what I wanted at the time. That again, so it would just be easy for me.
Yeah.
And built it, and then just started promoting it in those groups. Every time when this thread comes up, I'd say, hey, check out ChurchLancer. It'll be easier than going through each of these comments.
Yep.
And there's, I think, 70 or 80 or so creative freelancers and agencies that are in there as well.
How many do you have any idea how many people have been hired through the website?
I don't. I wish I did. So that's one of the few things that I want to do that I'd like to do and rebuild it. I've yet to rebuild it. But that's a project that I want to take on again. And part of that's just because I haven't decided on what I want the future of it to be.
Yeah.
But I kind of want to nail that down before I rebuild it.
Yeah.
But it's I hear from quite a few that have gotten jobs from it. I remember hearing one time a guy that was getting that had gotten a few gigs from it, or at least gotten a few inquiries from it. Yeah. A freelancer, he asked me if there were some issues on the site because he hadn't gotten any recently, and he usually does, and it was affecting his business in a way.
Interesting.
And there weren't any issues. It was just he wasn't really getting any leads. But and I've heard that people have gotten either gotten jobs from it or have gotten leads that have led to other things, or have gotten leads and they didn't work out, and that's fine too. Yeah. But I don't have an exact number. That's one of the things I've thought about when I rebuild is so I can actually track that. Yeah. How often some of that stuff's used. I don't have a way to track any of that right now. I just hear from people that are that have been using it.
Yeah. So I want to talk about whether. So the question I get a lot is, should we outsource or insource? Yeah. And I'm, being an outsourcer and
somebody that gets outsourced.
Somebody who gets outsourced too. I'm obviously all for outsourcing, so I can argue that side. I'm curious at Redeemer, is most stuff done in-house? Because the bigger the organization, more likely that you do it in-house. Yep. But I'm curious your just personal practices and what's your opinion around when to outsource, when to, it's easier just to do it yourself.
Yeah, so Redeemer's an interesting one where, we have the Redeemer churches, I should say. We have 5 different churches now. And then we have our sister organizations, which are different ministries. Yep. So we have City to City, which is a church planting organization, Hope for New York, which is kind of a nonprofit that is there to help other nonprofits. And so they provide like grant writing assistance and that type of stuff to nonprofits in the city. Yeah. We have a counseling center that's independent. We have a Center for Faith and Work that works, do faith and work. Yep. And a few other things within that too. So we have quite a few different churches and ministry. We're all on the same floor. We all share a lot of the, I'm actually part of what we call central services, so things like HR, communications, that type of stuff. Yep. Within, say, communications, we have that's assisting all those ministries. We have a full-time video manager, a part-time person that's under him, and then we have a full-time graphic designer. Yep. And then our video person we hire out freelancers for that, because just we need bodies sometimes. And so we hire freelancers for different projects, all local. And then our graphic design, for the most part, is pretty much all done in-house with our one graphic designer. His name's Lee, and he's just, he's been with Redeemer for years, and he's just incredibly efficient. I mean, I can send him something, I'll get something back in 5 minutes. And there's pros and cons of that, but with that big organization, one graphic designer is pretty rare. It's pretty rare to be able to do that, and that's all because of Lee's efficiency. I think if Lee were to ever move on, or we'd probably be stuck in the sense of like there'd need to be changes in that. I don't think we could just find one person to replace him. And I would say the same thing for Andrew, our video person. He's also efficient. And then it comes a lot of times where I will say some of the less the churches and some of the ministries occasionally will hire out freelancers, say if they want something that's going to need to be not necessarily more hands-on, but maybe more creative and unique, that would be outside of what our normal creative people would do. They might outsource that, or if there's something where there's not somebody that's an expert on staff. Most notably, we probably for outsourcing would be our web stuff. We have an IT team, and they're hands-on more like office IT. But then also like behind our CHMS, which is on Touchpoint, and they're managing a lot of that stuff. The website is more under communications, and that we've always outsourced to a larger kind of agency usually. We've kind of occasionally I'll do something. So like I rebuilt, most recently we have a site called New Birth Portraits. New Birth Portraits are kind of testimonial videos of people kind of coming to faith or having or I guess recoming to faith. And it's just a video kind of archive of all those stories that we've captured over the years. So I rebuilt that. The Redeemer, I guess, hired me to rebuild that site as a freelancer, and then occasionally we'll, or I guess always it's usually web stuff that we hire out for. My personal opinion on that, I mean, it really depends. I think there's churches, if you're a church of 100, you probably don't need a full-time graphic designer, right? And so I think there's great businesses out there. Most probably prominent is, say, Church Media Squad. Church Media Squad is a company that does all you need graphic design for churches at a low rate. I think it's like $500 or $600 a month. And they put out fantastic work. I mean, it's high quality. I'm sure there's some stipulations there on like how quick the turnaround time is and stuff like that. That's going to be perfect for, say, a church of 100.
Sounds like it'd be good for a church of 5,000.
I've contemplated us trying to hire him for some things just to save time. So exactly, it's perfect for churches of all sizes, and they have churches of all sizes on there. Even if you just need to have like a second person, it's kind of or second. Even if you have a full-time graphic designer, just somebody you can kind of hand some of that stuff off to. So there's some companies that have popped up like that, and there's some other ones in that space that are church related. There's definitely quite a few that are not church specific that are in that space too. Like I said, the quality is not quite as there. They're usually outsourced to another country. Whereas the benefit, and Mike, the founder of Church Media Squad, to his credit, has just put together an incredible team of talented people. And they all have worked. I think everyone on staff for him has worked at a church before. So they understand it, right? And so they understand what churches need. They understand what the expectations there are, the quality, and just that process. And I've even come for the site that I run for Gospel in Life. We also hire out for web development. And I had an issue a few years ago when we were trying to find new developers on our old platform, where it was a unique platform, so there weren't a lot of, called Magento, there weren't a lot of developers available for. And so I ran into an issue where every developer I talked to, and even the ones we ended up hiring at the time, they weren't Christians. I don't have an issue with that. But the issue was that there was the onboarding to get them to understand what we needed and just start understand. I mean, they didn't even understand things like, okay, so you have 3 speakers every week that we need to get their content on the site, and this happens they just don't understand what a church service is like. And again, no discredit to them, it's just that they didn't understand that. And so there was a huge learning curve that even if somebody had ever actually even just gone to church for a year would probably have better understanding than they did, and could have saved us so much time, and even just having like they'd be able to think through things differently. And so that's where benefits of like saying Church Media Squad versus some of the other ones that aren't focused on churches come in, is they just understand it better.
Yes.
And that comes back to the exact same thing with ChurchLancer. One of the reasons I built ChurchLancer is because, say, in those Facebook threads that we were talking about where people ask, hey, I need a logo design, who do you recommend? You constantly get people, and you still do, that say Fiverr.
Yes.
Fiverr has its place.
It's one way to outsource. Yes.
If you're not familiar with Fiverr, is a very low-cost market. It's a marketplace where you can go and find someone to do pretty much anything for you.
Yep.
You can get a logo design for $5 literally.
Yes.
It is going to be crap. You
could probably $5 you spend on.
Yeah.
Yep.
You can probably spend $50 and get one that looks good. But again, the people that are making those are usually pulling from a template, and it's not going to be unique.
Yep. And for some situations, that's all you need.
Some situations, that is all you need. Exactly.
Yes.
And they do other things. You can find literally anything. I think you can get done there. Whether it's voice, if you need a voiceover person to do it, you can do it there. If you need like a intro graphic animation or something to your YouTube videos, they can do it there.
Yep.
And there's a lot of different. I don't think you should never use Fiverr. I think there's probably some things there that it's good for, and then some things that you probably shouldn't use it for.
Yep.
But I felt like this was one of those things where you probably shouldn't use it for.
Yeah.
Again, it comes down to you could pay that person $50 on Fiverr to do your logo. Or I know some freelancers that, are just starting out. They could probably give you a logo that's just as good or better, and they actually might only charge $100. Now, I'm talking really low rates here.
Yes.
I think you should be paying more for a logo than $100. But there are people that are Christians that know the church world that might only charge you $100 because they're new, or just because they need the money, but they just want to build up their portfolio, and so they're happy for that. For whatever reason. And so I thought there was a space there where it's like, hey, instead of saying let's go to Fiverr and getting someone that I don't want to trash Fiverr, but let's go with somebody that actually knows the church world.
Yes. Could
probably be in your budget, and you actually might like the final asset that you get actually better.
Yep.
And so so that's what we did. We started reaching out to people, and then as we started I've never done any promotion outside of literally the only promotion I ever done outside of initial, like saying, hey, I created this, is me responding in those Facebook groups when someone asks for a logo designer or WordPress designer or something, and saying, here's some options, and go to check out ChurchLancer. And on ChurchLancer, we have it where you can filter down all of those things and find those. You can filter down by budget and location and things like that. Most of them are based in the U.S. We have a few that are in, like, I think the U.K. and Canada, maybe Australia even.
Okay.
But yeah, so you can find. There's a possibility. We have people list their city. You could even find somebody local.
Yep.
And there's a way to do that. But you can also, again, one of the things I have them list is like what their budget is for different things, and it's not required, but most of them do it.
Yep.
Or so what I should say what their minimum required budget is for something.
Okay.
So somebody might have down that there's a $500 minimum budget for a logo, or $1,000 minimum for a website design.
Yep.
And then they have listed somewhat a minimum version of their portfolio. I think I have it limited down to like 10 images. They can upload 10 images. And so that's ideally that's their best work. Similar to what you would find on, say, Dribbble or some other Behance if you were looking at or just their website.
Yep.
It's kind of the idea isn't that you use, idea with ChurchLancer is that you would use ChurchLancer to find somebody, and then you guys go and have that relationship. You reach out to them, figure out if it's in their budget or not. But back to the original question was more around, should you be outsourcing or should you do it?
Yeah.
I think it depends. It depends on the church size. Yes. There's going to be some things. It depends on your budget. I think there's for somewhat larger churches that can afford it. I think those churches should have a communications person first and foremost.
Yes.
Like, I think a communications person should probably be hired before a video person.
Yes.
Hired before a graphic designer.
Because they can manage the outsourced
Exactly. So they can manage
support.
that. And a lot of these communications people, and you can find them in these groups, are are talented in many ways, and they actually
Yes.
do this stuff already.
Yep.
They're a communications person first, but they also dabble in graphic design, or they
Yes.
dabble in building websites.
Yep.
They dabble in that, or it's a side hustle or something like
Yep.
that.
Yep.
So they can actually do that for you.
Yes.
Or at the very least, they can be the one that's project managing, someone outsourcing
Yes.
it. They can be the one that's communicating with Church Media Squad on getting
Yep.
the graphics done.
Yes.
So I think I would say for churches, I would say your number one priority, one of your maybe not one of your early hires, but a early hire should be a communications person.
Yes. So communications director, communications pastor, communications manager,
Yep.
whatever that looks like, that's your hub person for
Yep.
communications.
Yep.
And then, so let's talk about maybe what would you say are the top 3 things they should be freelancing, I guess, to engage somebody around support.
I think a few people will probably get mad at me with this, but I would say graphic design is not one of the first jobs you should hire.
Okay.
Not one of the first
Interesting.
positions you fill.
Interesting.
I think that's one that's a lot easier to outsource
Okay.
to a Church Media Squad.
So that'd be a good place to go get
I would say graphic design is one of the. I'm not saying that you should never have a graphic designer on staff.
Yeah.
But I would say I wouldn't hire a graphic design after you've hired a church communications person.
Yes.
Or a communications person for your church. The graphic designer would not be my next hire.
Yep.
Even though that's probably a common
Yep.
trajectory for most churches. I would say you need a visual storyteller.
Okay.
And what I mean by that is someone that does both photo and video.
So who would you freelance? Who would you like prioritize from a freelancing perspective, not a hiring perspective? So when you're looking to kind of build your team of freelancers
Yep.
that you're contracting, what roles do you prioritize?
So graphic design would be first.
Yep.
Then I think it depends. It depends on your budget.
Yeah.
I would say a lot of churches can find. I think your next position. I mean, graphic design is something that's going to be needed,
Yes.
regardless if you're outsourcing or not. Right?
Yep.
Like you're going to have bulletins.
Yep.
You're going to have. You're going to need probably some social posts that you're promoting stuff.
Yeah.
You're going to need. There's banners that you're going to be. That is going to be hung on the corner of the church to promote something.
Yes.
Like you need some type of graphic design. So
Yep.
even after church communication, that's the first your next payroll, whether it's a freelancer or a company or something or on staff, is going to be a graphic design person.
Yes.
That's just naturally the next need. The following need would be, like I said, visual storytelling, and so that's going to be a photographer / videographer.
Yep.
Now, I don't know if it's necessary to outsource. I would say that's the next hire.
Yeah.
Again, get those in quotation marks. I don't know if it's necessarily a. I would say if you have the budget, I would hire for that full time.
Yep.
I would hire for that full time before I'd hire a graphic designer full time.
Yep.
Just because I think you're going to get a lot more out of that.
Yep.
But I don't think that's the only way to do it.
Yep.
I think that's actually something that most churches actually have a talented photographer already at their church. It's very, very likely, or somebody that's interested in photography. That's already in their church. Rob Lauter, who's the director of digital at Summit Church.
Yeah.
Where's Summit Church? Is it North Carolina?
North Carolina.
North Carolina, yeah. Scott, not Scott. What's the pastor's name?
I'm blanking on his name.
Not Greer.
Yeah, Greer. J.D. Greer.
J.D. Greer, yeah. One of my pastors growing up was Scott Greer. It's a different name, but I was getting confused. J.D. Greer, popular pastor, he's president of the SBC. Very large church there, multi-site, huge. Rob just started something called Church Photographers. I think it's churchphotographers.com.
Okay.
Just yesterday they did a summit on all those groups we were talking about. Where they train. And Rob's big thing is training a volunteer team on how to do church photography. So church photography meaning, it's obviously things like staff photos, but also mainly services. So capturing photography and service that you can then repurpose on your website, repurpose on social media, tons of different ways you can reuse photography, right?
Yep.
And capturing, say, like baptisms. If you're doing like a fall festival or Christmas stuff's coming up, make sure you're capturing any of those events that you're doing.
Yeah. So
I think that's a really important one. Is making sure you're capturing those events, and that can either be again through a hire. I wouldn't say that's. I guess I would say if you have the budget, hire somebody. If you don't, work on your communications person should be working on building up a volunteer team of photographers, and not even videography, but photography. Like I said, there's likely, regardless of your church size, I could almost guarantee you there's a probably 90% chance that you have somebody in your congregation that is either a professional photographer or a hobby photographer or is interested in photography. And they probably do really good photos on their iPhone. And they love it, and they love Instagram. And those, I guarantee you that you probably have somebody like that in your church, regardless of your size. And so it's about, I would recommend finding those people and getting them involved and and asking them to help you with those. And maybe it's growing out a team, maybe it's just that one person. There's different ways there. Now, I think there could be places to hire a photographer on as a freelancer. That's also one. I wouldn't bother. I thought about this for ChurchLancer, if we should have something like that. I didn't bother with it because it's such a local thing, right? Most of the jobs on ChurchLancer are something you can do remote. They can be done remotely. Whereas photography and videography, that needs to be done locally. And you're probably not going to want to. It's probably not wise to spend a budget to fly somebody in to do that, unless you're a bigger church and it's something unique. So there's tons of local photographers. We're not going to be able to list them best for you, so it's finding those locally. There's probably some type of way to find it locally already. So you could, if you had an event and you can't find somebody within your church, still think you should. You could hire a photographer. Redeemer, we actually do that sometimes. One of our ministries does it pretty commonly for events. They have a few different freelance photographers that they hire for different events specifically. And those people just are really, they know what they're doing. It costs probably a couple $100, and they're professionals, and so you get the assets, you get all the photos, you get a link with 40, 50, 60 photos or something that are all really great and usable right away. So that's great. There's other organizations, if you're a larger church or you're doing like a large ministry, and you do like say a conference or something, say like a Orange conference or Gospel Coalition conference or something like that. There's an agency called Reverb. Are you familiar with Reverb? Those guys are great. They do their specialty is, and they don't only work with ministries, but it's something that's in their heart. I mean, right? So they're based out of Chattanooga, but
Clark is great.
Clark's fantastic. Basically,
we got to get him on the Clark. If you're listening, you got to get on the podcast.
And Clark, you need to come hang out with us. We need you in New York. Clark, he keeps trying to he keeps reaching out to me to try to do something with us, and I'm like, I don't have a need. We're not quite the fit for that one.
We got to find a reason for him to get out here.
But basically, Clark and Reverb, RVRB. Their focus is on events, and basically, their big thing is they're basically taking over your social, not just Instagram, but mainly Instagram, but your social for that day. And they have they do everything from grabbing like a host for you to just capturing everything on video and photography and doing like interviews with guests or interviews with your speakers or different things like that. And it's all just high quality. It looks amazing, and they'll put together at maybe the end of the day or the next day a highlight video for you. There's things like that I think is worth outsourcing that they could. I know for us, I've thought about it for us to try to, if we could hire them and bring them in to do anything, they would do 10 times what our team could do, right? Just because that's their experts in that. And that's the big thing with all this is just hire. It's important to hire the experts, and that's what they're experts in. So if you ever have a conference or something big that you want to just like, you want to really deliver on social, and have some like great video assets and everything afterwards. Reverb's great for that, and they're kind of an agency firm type thing to hire for that. So I think it depends. Like if I was to host I mean, we host events all the time where it's 500 to 1,000 people. I would say that's probably not quite big enough for what we'd want to do. But if I was to host an event that was 5,000 people or plus, I'd probably bring in those guys before I would say have our team do it. And also our team would be doing other things anyways. We'd probably be in charge of the live stream, and so it'd be easier to outsource all of that work to those guys. And again, they're the experts in that, so they're going to do it a lot but then we would, even if I had the best team I thought I could get together. So there's a lot of variables in it, but photography and videography I think are so important, especially in today. and that's why I kind of lean heavier on that, focusing on that versus graphic.
Yes.
Because it's one of those where it's more natural. Graphic on Instagram isn't really, it's not natural for the platform. It's not organic to that platform. It's obviously produced, right?
Yep.
Whereas a video, even if it's high quality, is actually that's a native thing to be on Instagram.
Yep.
A video or a photo.
Yep. Yep. And I'm curious, do you have any copywriters on ChurchLancer?
I think I feel
like that'd be an area that a church could really use some support.
So ChurchLancer, I think I have at least a few marketing people.
Yeah.
I'm trying to remember. I think there's one that might be, but they might do some other things.
Okay. Interesting.
That's one thing I've looked at with ChurchLancer is, do I go beyond the creative field?
Yeah.
So I've been approached about actually even like people acquiring ChurchLancer because they have, I know somebody that's working on something that's going to be bigger than ChurchLancer in the sense of like they basically want to create a like an Upwork for churches.
Yeah.
Right?
Interesting.
And right now we're kind of a very mini version of that, right?
Yep.
We're not trying to be a middleman. We're trying to like point you in the right direction of who to hire.
Yep.
Whereas Upwork's kind of the middleman, and like you do all your project management through there, the payments go through there. And I've contemplated like maybe I offer that, maybe I do that. Right now, also, ChurchLancer is very focused on the creative fields. So, graphic design, motion graphics, websites, stuff like that.
Yeah.
I've had virtual assistants reach out to me and ask to be listed on there. And so far, we've held off. And I keep going back and forth on this. Should I open it up to other should I open it to, say, coaching or virtual assistants and just anything that a church could need? I actually don't know, and that's one of the things where I would say my goal is to rebuild ChurchLancer, and I need to make some of these decisions on what I want it to be going forward. Do I want to monetize it in any way in the sense of like, do I want to act like an Upwork and be a middleman where people can actually hire the freelancer through there and pay through there, and that way they don't have to worry about how the freelancers handles all that stuff. I think there's some pros and cons to that if I were to be involved in that.
Sure.
And it gets a lot more complex, and that's why I would want to monetize it to make sure to justify doing it. And it's also so niche where I'm like, do I even bother? I don't know. I don't need it to make money. Like I'm financially, I'm doing okay.
I think it's a generous gift to both churches and to freelancers. Yeah, and a good connection piece. So I'll be excited to see where you go with the platform. Any advice for churches as we wrap up this conversation?
Regarding freelancing and things like that?
Regarding anything involved in the church. You've got
anything involved in the church.
Microphone.
Oh, that's hard.
Speaking to church leaders.
Actually, I actually just posted this today in the church communications group. I don't think people understand quite what I was getting at with it, but speaking as freelancers, so Veterans Day is coming up, right?
Yep.
There's so many Veterans Day graphics that are pre-made for you or that I saw people posting and sharing and asking for and stuff like that.
Yes.
This is one of those, again, when I come back to graphic design versus visual storytelling through photography and videography, this is one of those ones where you would get a much better return investing in instead of a graphic for Veterans Day and saying, hey, thank you for your service, whatever your graphic's going to say, Happy Veterans Day, whatever it is. Why not tell a story of a veteran that's in your church or a local? It's very coming back to one of those things. Highly likely that you have a veteran in your church, regardless of your size.
Yes.
And so why not tell their story?
Yeah.
And so whether that's instead of a graphic, focus on doing a like Humans of New York style photo.
Yes.
And that's really easy. Yep. If anybody with an iPhone 10 or newer can do a portrait mode on their phone and take a photo of that veteran and ask them a few questions and turn something into a great post that is going to be way more memorable, way more have a much bigger impact on one, just for the veteran. Like, I'm sure they're going to appreciate you telling their story.
Yeah.
And then also to your congregation, because they're going to actually hear from an actual veteran. They're going to feel more invested in that person's life, as well as the the church. They're gonna learn something new, most likely.
Yep.
It's just gonna go a lot further. Or if you have the means, then create a video about it, like a video testimonial or something.
Yeah,
that's one of those things where it's where I think we just need to go beyond, as far as social, need to go beyond. And I say this, we don't have anything planned at Redeemer for any of that. I'm not I'm not trying to sit over here on my high horse as like you guys are doing this wrong, but more of just like we need to be thinking that way versus let's just get something up. Yeah, which I think is kind of the method of like with the graphic, or even like anytime there's a tragedy, right? Or whether it's a shooting or a tornado or whatever it is, it's like pray for X city or pray for whatever it is. I don't think those are bad necessarily, but I think I think we can go. We feel like we have to say something, which I don't think is always the case. Yeah, we feel like we have to say something on social, and then but what we do it with is, by putting a graphic up, is just. I think you would have been better off just not saying something to some extent. Yeah. Or I think if what would really show, whether it's something like Veterans Day or a tragic event, what could really go a long way is actually investing a little bit more time. Put it on hold. Like don't just do it just to do it. Yep. Setting aside time and actually investing in what would something thoughtful be around whatever it is. And telling a story here. Yeah. And maybe that's in the sense of a tragedy. Maybe instead of the day of the event, it's what happened 3 days later when Joe and Karen from your church went down and helped those tornado victims. And here's a photo they took of a family that we want to help. Yes. That's down there, right? Or again, this veteran served in Iraq and. Grew up in our church, and here's a little bit of his story of what's faith like after seeing some of the things that he's seen. Yeah, I think there's way more ways to. There's a lot more ways to communicate what we're intended with these posts, like what our hearts are in the right place with those. Yes. And I think that as a church, we understand that there's a need to respond to those things, whatever it is. But I think what we really need to do is get past the let's get something up mindset and say, one, do we need to actually do anything here? Yep. And two, if we do, what does it actually look like to knock it out of the park? Or what does it actually look like? That's going to do something that's going to impact our community, our church community. Yep. Posting a graphic is not going to impact your church community. Yeah. Telling someone's story in your church is going to impact your church community. Yeah. Whether it's just that person or two other people that actually took something from it. Yes. And so it's just investing time in that.
I love that. I love that. And I would say that's across the board in that strategy, just being thoughtful and investing time, you know, is how you become more effective. Well, Casey, this has been a great conversation, fascinating. All the different things that you're doing. I'm grateful for your friendship. And I would say your generosity with the giving platforms, with ChurchLancer, and with, the WordPress development that you do. So many different things for the kingdom, and then even the things you model through Gospel and Life and at Redeemer. Yeah. Thank you, man. How can people connect with you online? What's the best place to connect with you online? So just
Casey Fulgenzi everywhere. At Casey Fulgenzi, and that's CASEYFULGENZI. I'm on all the platforms and all the groups.
Yes, you will find him on the internet. So just search for him on the internet and you'll find him, and check out the different platforms. And even on the platforms, you can find a link back to his site and the places to connect with Casey. Thanks so much for listening to this episode of the Social Media Church Podcast. Again, I'm Nils Smith. You can follow me at Nils Smith on social media or nilssmith.com. And check out our website, socialmedia.church. For the show notes and everything, and there's going to be a lot of show notes for this episode because we've got a lot of links and things that we covered and want to draw your attention to. So go check that out, socialmedia.church, and leave a rating and a review on Apple Podcast or Spotify or wherever it is that you're listening, and share this podcast with a friend. Thanks so much for listening.